I'm Eric Marcus, and this is Making Gay History. Greg Brock never liked the limelight, but the self-described sissy boy from Mississippi didn't get a choice. From the moment he was born in 1953, it was clear he was different. And the way he was different brought him the kind of attention no one wants, from bullies, gay bashers, and a disappointed father. But that didn't keep Greg from excelling in a profession where just being himself made him a role model and trailblazer at some of the most important newspapers of the time. The Charlotte Observer, the Washington Post, and by 1987 at the San Francisco Examiner, where he was the assistant managing editor in charge of Page One. In the world of journalism back then, an out gay person at that level of the business was a really big deal. Greg was also a driving force behind a 16-day series in the San Francisco Examiner called Gay in America. It was published for the 20th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. No one had done anything like it at any news outlet before. When I met Greg in 1989, it was rare to find anyone working in mainstream journalism who was gay and out. The reason was simple. For most people in most places, it was a career killer. I learned that lesson myself as a young producer at CBS News. In 1988, I was told by a senior executive that they'd never put an openly gay news person in front of the camera. I left CBS soon after to write my book, Making Gay History. So here's the scene. I've traveled from my apartment on Russian Hill in San Francisco to Greg's office downtown on Mission Street. It's just a couple of months since the publication of Gay in America, and Greg is getting ready to leave the Examiner to go back to the Washington Post. He's a little guy with bright blue eyes, a round face, and a sweet smile. He's a few days shy of his 36th birthday. Except for his tie, Greg and I are dressed almost identically in journalist drag. Pressed shirts and khakis. We're a long way from where Greg grew up, the tiny town of Crystal Springs, Mississippi, in the segregated South. As I clip the microphone to his shirt and press record, he takes me back to where he was born.
I mean, I was a sissy boy from the word go. I played with dolls. I took baton lessons. I was a mama's boy, effeminate. I was a pretty little boy. As a child, I was really huge blue eyes and was very soft and very pretty. In fact, my birth certificate, I was marked as a girl. And that was always a running joke at family reunions. My dad, that's the only thing he ever said, well, it took him years to figure out otherwise. I'd go home and cry myself to sleep a lot of nights. Huge white antebellum home, columns all the way around it. In that town, the context of that town, probably upper middle class. We had money that a lot of people didn't, though we didn't have the old family name, which is really what counts there. Mother, father, 3 children, nice car. You know, you get the scene. We went to church every week, and we did everything you were supposed to do, except under that roof, there was nothing. There's no love, there was no interaction, there was no nothing. You know, my dad wanted me to play football and do all these things. He was a very masculine, very blue-collar type. And, you know, I didn't do anything the other boys my age did. I didn't like to hunt, I didn't like to fish. My dad took me to deer camp once. Deer camp being this place that he and all of his buddies they belonged to, where it's kind of an old house, and about 30 men go, and they have bunks, and they have 2 black women who cook them meals, and they go out in the woods and kill deer. So I went. I don't remember how old I was, 10, 11. I didn't have a gun or anything, got me a gun. And I was like, I wasn't going to kill a deer. You know, God, I was just awful, just disastrous.
You must have felt like you were dropped on the planet from somewhere in outer space.
Yeah. Every year you got further and further away from your family. One time I went home, and they always put it in the paper, you know, the weekly paper, about who visited whom and who's home and all this kind of stuff. And I was in the personals column. My mother had put in there that Greg Brock, editor of the Washington Post, had been home to visit. You know, I started to tell Ben Bradley he had been, you know, booted out.
Right.
But again, not quite ever getting it.
What is the name of your town again?
Crystal Springs,
Mississippi.
Mm-hmm. And
how many people?
4,500, roughly. So about 20 miles south of Jackson, Mississippi. But since we're on this, I might as well tell you, I came out last year on the Oprah Winfrey Show to them.
You were you one of the? You were the one.
I was the one from Mississippi. Yeah.
This is Coming Out Day, 1988.
Right.
With
October 11th.
The National Gay Rights Advocates planned this.
They called me up, and I said, "Why would I do that? Everybody in the world knows I'm gay. If they want to know it, I'm very open about it." And so, what about your family? And I said, "Gulp." So all they were doing is submitting my name, though. But I knew it was a given that I was going to make it because my dad and Oprah Winfrey are from the same hometown in Mississippi, Kosciuszko, Mississippi. The producer interviewed me and talked to me and said, "Well, we'd like to fly up tonight and do the show in the morning." I said, "Well, you know, but the deal is you call your parents and tell them, and would you ask them if they would consent to a telephone hookup?" So,
oh my God. This is a little dramatic.
Oh yeah. So I called my dad. It was a Monday afternoon, October 10th. I've never felt so alone. Just my knees started shaking. There's just no way to describe it. I was scared. I just didn't know. And
you were a grown man by now.
And I was a grown man. I was 35 years old. And you know, you call your dad, you know, and it's a Monday afternoon. He's semi-retired, and he has his little business kind of next to his house now, and he gardens a lot. Oh, I just had this mental image of what he was doing. I could see his little house. They live out in the country. Mississippi, you know, some things don't change. You go out and check the mailbox every day, and you get a letter from long distance, you know, across the miles. That's really a big deal. Or when a long-distance phone call comes. I've been out there, and I know what it's like when you get the phone call that someone's died, or this has happened, or that's happened. And that's about what I was about to do to him. I was about to, on a Monday afternoon, October 10th, 1988, shatter his life.
Your father picks up the phone.
My stepmother picks up the phone.
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, we're out in the garden, you know, the whole bit.
Did you dial more than once?
No, just once. So I asked to speak to Daddy, and I said, you know, she said, "Let me get him." I said, "Well, you stay on the phone, too." So immediately my voice, I said, "Well, there's something I want to tell y'all, and been wanting to do this for a long time, just never it's been appropriate." And so my voice started cracking, breaking. And she said, "Well, honey, that's all right. What is it?" I said, "Well, I guess the best way to say it is the good news is I'm going to be on the Oprah Winfrey Show tomorrow." And she says, "Oh, that's wonderful, that's wonderful. Well, I'll have to watch it." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure you're going to invite the neighbors over." So that kind of broke the ice a little bit, and I chuckled and kind of got my voice back. I said, "That's the news," but I said, "It's the type show she's doing." I said, "Since I've been out in San Francisco," I said, "I've sort of moved into the public eye a little bit. There have been some feature stories written about me, or a feature story. And I said, a lot of people know me here now." And I said, "There's a reason for that." But I said, "I can't mail you these articles, clip them out." I said, I'd like to share it with you. And I'd like to think that you know, this would be in the same vein as when I was at Ole Miss, and I got awards, and I was this, and, you know, we always got the newspaper clippings and put them in the scrapbook. But I said, you know, I guess my fear is that you wouldn't put these clippings in your scrapbook. And I said, the reason is, I said, in this city, I'm very well known because I said, for years now, at newspapers I worked at, I said, I am gay, and I'm very open about it, but I've never told John. And I was just waiting. I can't remember the precise conversations and the reactions, but I remember my dad saying, well, that he had prayed a lot, that his suspicions were wrong. And then we went on to talk, and I, you know, it was kind of teary, but he really opened up, and he talked a great deal, and I was surprised. And he even said that if they called him, he would talk to them on the telephone, which stunned me. They didn't. They ended up choosing my mother.
What kind of reaction had you expected from him?
Hang up. Tell me not to ever come home again. Didn't want to hear from me or whatever. But they said, you know, that they loved me and wanted me to come home, visit them and stuff like that. That made it easier calling my mother, but I couldn't reach her. So I was already in Chicago at the hotel before I finally got a hold of her. And that was, again, just the opposite of what I expected. I told her, and she didn't say much. I thought she'd start crying and falling on the floor and, you know, whatever. She was pretty low-key about it. And went into the typical Mississippi thing about, which I'd heard for years, well, you know, I've got black friends too, where she said, well, I know, son, you know, there are these two lesbians that come in the store all the time, and they're just as nice as they can be. And short conversation, she didn't say much. and said she talked to the Oprah people, they called her. So the limo picks me up, and I go down there.
Are you nervous at all?
Oh, not really.
Because you've done the worst part.
The worst part was over. It's an all-gay audience, been handpicked by gay rights people there, or parents of gays. The PFLAG people were there. So it was a friendly audience, and the format was the first 5 minutes, Oprah says it's National Coming Out Day, people's lives today will be changed, what they're about to tell people. So they start popping up in the audience at mics saying, "Hi Mom, hi Dad, something I've been wanting to tell you, I'm gay. Hi Cousin Sid, you know, you've made me feel really uncomfortable at all these family reunions, and I just wanted you to know I'm gay." And it was great. And then she took us one by one and did our individual stories. So she started talking to me and the whole bit. And she really got into the Southern routine, you know, it was great. And that made me that much more comfortable. And then, you know, just she's reading cue cards, and she said, "Well, we have Greg's mother, Mrs. Sharp, on the phone. She's remarried. Was remarried. That's the second part of the Oprah story." And my mother's very Southern, very country, sort of soft-spoken. And she said, "Mrs. Sharp, are you there?" And she said, "Yes, I am." And so I'm saying that, I should have thought, what are they going to do with the camera? This is a voice being piped in the studio. It's either on me or Oprah, right?
You didn't think about that.
And she starts talking, and she said, "Well, Mrs. Sharp, what have you been thinking since Greg called you last night?" "Well," she said, "I haven't gotten a wink of sleep all night." And I thought, oh my God, what have I got myself into? She said, I could hear how distraught she was in her voice. She sounded pretty cool about it the night before. Well,
she was in shock.
She was in shock. She called my little sister and my redneck plumber brother-in-law, and I was sure that, like, they had been up all night and the family was just in a tizzy. I mean, they live for these things in the South, you know. Crises is what gets a Southern family one day to the next. And so Oprah says, "Well, like, what did Greg say when he called you? Did he ask you about your gardening and how the weather was, or did he just like lay it on you and say, 'Well, I'm gay'?" And she said, "Well, he just laid it on me." So they talked back and forth, and she did tell Oprah she'd never suspected. And I just like made this horrendous face. I made my dad really mad that she said that. And
because she had in fact suspected.
Oh,
they talked
of
about
course.
it.
Hell, she'd gotten me to take baton lessons at age 5. And so then she talked about her dad and how he had married late in life, and she thought with my career and everything that I would eventually get around to finding the right person and settling down. And Oprah said, "You mean the right woman?" And she said, "Yes, the right woman." But she ends by saying, you know, she says, "But the bottom line is that he's my flesh and blood and my only son, and I love him." And the audience just burst out into applause. It was great, very nice. And then she talked to me some more, you know, Oprah did. And yeah, it was quite an experience. But then 4 days later, so I come back to San Francisco, that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and she calls me. She said, "Well, your sister said you were going to call me this weekend, wait a few days." But she said, "I wanted to call and tell you that, you know, it's been a rough week, son, and I haven't been anywhere in a long time, so John," that was my stepfather, "is going to take me down to New Orleans just to get away." I said, "Well, that's good. Y'all should go. Enjoy yourselves, get some rest. I'll talk to you when we get back." Saturday morning, my machine has a hysterical message from my little sister, that my stepfather has dropped dead of a heart attack in New Orleans.
Oh my!
I immediately pick up the phone. I call my ex-lover, who I talk to every day still. And I says, "My stepfather just dropped dead with a heart attack, and I know it's going to be my fault." So sure enough, there was that discussion in the family. Well, he just broke his mama's heart, and no matter that my stepfather had one lung, one kidney, and had 4 heart attacks. You know, he just watching Greg's mama just with a broken heart, and he just couldn't stand the strain, just keeled over with a heart attack. And then his mother, by the time they got his body back to Mississippi, his mother had died. So they had a double funeral. And I said in the South, there's nothing better than a double wedding than a double funeral. I mean, they love those, you know. They had matching casket pieces and buried them side by side. So I have a great book in me too, but when they all die off. So I didn't go back. No, no way. I decided my absence would be best. I had caused enough stir that week. Because I'd love to have known what that little town was saying. They were in quite a stir, and all those ladies were calling each other. Well, I always knew what they said. I just always knew he was queer.
This must have changed your life in some way.
Yeah. It started my life, I think, in a lot of levels. Living a lie, not being yourself, not being open, carrying this tremendous burden around. It's a burden lifted.
And now it's theirs.
Yes, now it's theirs.
Greg Brock did exactly the opposite of what his tormentors expected he'd do. Instead of cowering, Greg chose to be himself. And it wasn't just the teasing that gave him the determination and courage to live his life openly. Greg was the target of gay bashers when he was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Twice. In preparing for this episode, I reread Greg's story in my oral history book and found myself in tears revisiting how Greg was beaten the first time and then kidnapped from his own home the second. Greg thought he'd be killed, but found an opening and ran for his life, and that experience left him all the more determined never to hide. His bravery throughout his life takes my breath away. Just recently, Greg retired from his job as a senior editor at the New York Times. He'd been there for 2 decades. I was in touch with him the other day, and he told me that he'll be spending the next year in Oxford, Mississippi, where he has a small house not far from Ole Miss, the university where he got his undergraduate degree in journalism back in 1975. That's the same university that gave Greg the Silver M in 2012. It's an annual award given to a Mississippi-connected journalist whose career has exhibited the highest tenets of honorable public service journalism inside or outside the state. Making Gay History is a team effort. Thank you to executive producer Sarah Birmingham and audio engineer Ann Pope. We had production assistance from Josh Gwynn. Our theme music was composed by Fritz Myers. Thank you also to social media strategist Will Coley, our webmaster Jonathan Dozer-Ezel, researchers Bronwyn Pardis and Zachary Seltzer, and photo editor Michael Green. A very special thank you to our guardian angel, Jenna Weiss-Berman. The Making Gay History podcast is a co-production of Pineapple Street Media with assistance from the New York Public Library's Manuscripts and Archives Division and One Archives at the USC Libraries. Season 3 of this podcast is made possible with funding from the Ford Foundation, which is on the front lines of social change worldwide. If you like what you've heard, go ahead and write a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Your reviews really help other folks find us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go to makinggayhistory.com for a full list of options. That's where you'll find all our episodes, including photographs, notes, and links to additional information about the many people we've featured in Making Gay History. And don't miss the totally adorable Christmas 1956 photo of Greg Brock clutching his most prized present in front of the tree, a baby doll. So long until next time.